The Limits of Libertarianism, a critique of Milei's doctrine. Defining the doctrine. The political philosophy articulated by Argentinian President Javier Milei at the United Nations is a classic formulation of libertarianism. This doctrine prioritizes individual autonomy, arguing that prosperity and freedom are maximized through minimal government intervention, free markets, and the strict protection of negative rights such as life, liberty, and property. Its foundational premise is that all individuals are born free and equal before the law, possessing inalienable rights that the state must protect but not infringe upon. The logical gap between theory and reality. The primary logical challenge for this philosophy lies in the discrepancy between its theoretical assumption of equal birth and the empirical reality of profound inequality. Libertarianism defines freedom primarily as freedom from coercion, especially by the state. However, it offers little remedy for individuals who are not born into circumstances where this freedom can be meaningfully exercised. Formal versus substantive equality. The doctrine guarantees equality before the law, formal equality, but is largely indifferent to equality of opportunity, substantive equality. A child born into poverty and a child born into wealth may have the same legal right to education or property, but their practical ability to access these rights is vastly different. This can perpetuate a cycle where initial advantages compound, creating a de facto aristocracy of wealth that the minimalist state is designed not to disrupt. The problem of private power. By focusing exclusively on constraining state power, the doctrine can be silent on coercion from private actors. For instance, a queer individual may face extreme violence and social exclusion in a community where majoritarian prejudice holds sway. In a purely libertarian framework, without anti-discrimination laws or state protection, their inalienable rights to life and liberty are rendered abstract and unprotected against non-governmental oppression. What is freedom for the majority can become tyranny for a vulnerable minority. A flawed conception of capitalism. A more neutral, logical description is that capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. The libertarian defense of this system is that free exchange is mutually beneficial. However, the critique that this system can lead to outcomes resembling economic slavery for those with only their labor to sell is a valid challenge to the doctrine's optimistic assumptions. If the system consistently generates vast inequalities that limit the effective freedom of large portions of the population, the libertarian claim that it guarantees universal prosperity is logically weakened. The necessity of a broader defense of freedom. Therefore, for a doctrine of freedom to be relevant to all citizens, including women, LGBTQ+ individuals, and the poor, it must address these limitations. This does not necessarily mean abandoning its core principles, but it logically necessitates a role for governance that goes beyond a mere night-watchman state. A government may need to act to equalize starting points through education and social safety nets, to protect citizens from private coercion through anti-discrimination laws and regulations that prevent the concentration of economic power from infringing on the liberties of others. The ultimate test, the consistency of principles. The question regarding international inaction, such as in Gaza, highlights a final logical test for any doctrine based on the defense of rights, the consistency of its application. If the right to life is indeed inalienable and universal, then its violation on a mass scale demands a response, regardless of borders. A philosophy that champions individual rights as paramount must logically confront situations where those rights are systematically destroyed. To remain coherent, the doctrine cannot be a selective justification for inaction. Its principles must be applied universally, challenging both domestic and international tyranny. The silence of nations in the face of atrocities ultimately questions the sincerity of any commitment to inalienable rights, revealing it as a geopolitical instrument rather than a genuine moral imperative. Description. This critique examines the political philosophy of Argentinian President Javier Milei, identifying it as a classic form of libertarianism that prioritizes individual autonomy, free markets, and a minimal night-watchman state. The analysis exposes several fundamental logical flaws in the doctrine. It argues that libertarianism's theoretical assumption of equal birth clashes with the reality of profound social and economic inequality, creating a gap between formal legal rights and substantive freedom. The critique highlights the philosophy's failure to address private coercion and the tyranny of majorities over vulnerable minorities, such as the LGBTQ+ community or the poor. Furthermore, it challenges the libertarian conception of capitalism, questioning its claim to universal prosperity when it can lead to outcomes resembling economic slavery for many. The piece concludes that a truly relevant doctrine of freedom must logically necessitate a state capable of ensuring substantive equality and protecting citizens from all forms of coercion, both public and private. Finally, it poses a crucial test of consistency. Any philosophy built on inalienable rights must apply those principles universally, challenging atrocities abroad as well as tyranny at home, lest it be revealed as a mere geopolitical instrument rather than a sincere moral imperative.